All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, Paris Olympics 2024 special. Okay. Where we're going to provide commentary on complicated topics about this year's Olympics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we might need to take them back to the origins of this podcast when we started in endurance sport, right?
Yes, hi everyone, Lisa Ringerfield, she, hers. Absolutely. For those who are newer to our pod, we began our journey in the podcasting space talking about triathlon initially and then expanding to endurance sport. And then obviously now we are doing everything and all the things. So this is taking us back to our roots a little bit, but we are both very excited about the start of the Olympics in a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this particular episode is a little bit of a special just because if you are a listener for the last few months, even years, you'll notice that usually we will have three phases: phase one, two, three, on different topics. They may or may not be related, but we're throwing that out the window a little bit with this particular episode so that we can solely focus on the Paris Olympics and Paralympics. So hang there with us with this different format because we wanted to make sure that we touched base on, gosh, so many topics connected to the Olympics. And so we pulled together our top 10 in relation to this year's Olympic Games. But I wanted to start us out, Dr. Lisa, with a word that I stumbled upon because we always have a word of the week. And so we had to find a word of the week that was connected to Paris 2024. And so I discovered this concept of Olympism. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. Olympism. And it's this concept that was created more than 120 years ago by Pierre de Coubertin. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing correctly. Pierre de Coubertin. Should have practiced that. But he was the founder of the modern Olympic movement and was really passionate about making the world a better place through sport. So, Lisa, I think that's something that you and I both would love to see happen, obviously. And so he created the Olympic movement and believed that sport could help bring communities together, stop wars, and promote healthy competition free from cheating and discrimination. Ultimately, Coubertin wanted to show how sport can make the world a better place by encouraging friendship, togetherness, and fair play. Think this is pretty interesting, Lisa, because we know that the modern Olympic Games started in the 1890s, where they kind of sharpened that definition a little bit in the Olympic Charter. And they specifically said that Olympism is a philosophy of life, exalting and combining in a balanced whole the qualities of body, will, and mind. Blending sport with culture and education, Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy of effort, the educational value of good example, social responsibility, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. I can get down with that definition all day long. Now, Lisa, it's up to us to critique whether we're seeing that in modern day. But that was the intention back in the 1890s. And Lisa, the Olympic movement, Olympians themselves, their legacies live on much longer than they do. Right now in the world, there are over 100,000 living Olympians, many of which don't earn money. They're no longer competing. Some of them are not even connected to their sport anymore. But we've archived and made sure that history did not forget what they did. So Olympism is this interesting concept that I think maybe we can probably kind of compare our top 10 to whether those aspirations actually are happening or not, right?
Yeah, I'd never heard of that word. So obviously, Olympians, people who are um, Olympians or have participated in the Olympics, but Olympism is much more. Yeah, it's philosophical, is what you're saying, right? So I suppose you could have someone who competes in the Olympics who does not display Olympism, right? Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's
Mm.
right. All right, so let's dive right in. Like I mentioned, there aren't going to be any phases today, but we are going to riff through our 10 topics here. So things are going to look a little bit different, but I'm really excited about all of these topics that we think that you should be interested in watching, knowing about, keeping your finger on the pulse of, as you hopefully yell and scream and throw your shoe at the TV as you're watching the Olympics, like we will. But the first topic, Lisa, this one caught my eye, and I saved it in my phone, and I said, we got to talk about this. Team USA. So, if the world doesn't already despise us for being arrogant and egocentric and self-centered and me focused, how about this, y'all? Team USA apparently found out that the accommodations would not be providing, let's just say, the air conditioning that we're used to. And so Team USA decided to bring their own damn air conditions. How about that? And Lisa, I it was so funny to me because on one hand, I understood France's perspective on we wanted to make the accommodations more, you know, more environmentally friendly, all these other things that I think are really important. And at the same time, my brain went back to, I believe it was 20, I want to say 2016, 2017. And I participated in the New York City triathlon on the hottest day in July that year. And I remember the night before, my training partner and I were staying at a friend of her family's. We were staying in an apartment, and it just did not dawn on me that the friend, the apartment owner, it just didn't dawn on me that they wouldn't have air conditioning in the apartment, especially in the middle of July, right? And so I'm grateful that they're opening up their space to us, but I'm thinking to myself, oh, tomorrow's race is going to be tough because I am not used to sleeping in non-air conditioned anything anywhere. Um, I've got to go into this race already knowing that I'm probably going to start the race out dehydrated. And the high for the day was supposed to be in the low 90s, and they had already shortened up some of the run within Central Park because they knew how hot it was going to be. You talking about somebody pissed off. I was pissed, right? Like I was equally grateful, but also equally pissed. And that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this story pop up because I'm thinking to myself, I'm an amateur, amateur triathlete, and I knew how it was going to affect my race. And I also subscribed to the tenet of nothing new on race day, including the air. Okay. So when I saw this, I'm thinking, if I were an Olympian, and this might be my one and done moment as an Olympian, I'm gonna need my own air conditioning. That's all I'm saying. So I know that I'm hypocritical in even bringing this topic up, but Lisa, I want to hear your perspective because I know you have been athletic for a very long time. I don't know how you feel about air condition or just global perspectives on accommodations, but tell me what you think. I'm going with the AC though.
I have to, yeah, I have to say I did not have a favorable response to this. I mean, climate change, right? Like many other countries that experience hot weather do not have air conditioning. They don't have the resources or the infrastructure to provide it. So that's pretty normal. I mean, growing up in the UK, it was never that hot there, but we don't have air conditioning. And so presumably France is the same. But obviously, things have shifted in over the last several decades, and we're getting hotter and hotter summers. So I do understand that, but I also find it to be very American, very US American to just haul over a bunch of air conditioners or however they're doing it, right? And then I also
Right.
wonder, does that put them at an advantage? Because there are going to be other teams that will not have access to that, or chose not to because they felt it was disrespectful or they just didn't have the resources to do it. And so now you have Team USA, having access to these cooler living conditions. And so how does that tip the balance in their favor competitively, right? So that's an interesting perspective, but it doesn't surprise me that Team USA, of all of the teams, would be the ones that are like, you don't have air conditioning? That's not acceptable. We'll just bring our own, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, but then, to your great point, Lisa, maybe it's an equalizer though, because let's say that there are some people that show up to Paris that are used to the heat, so they're going with what they're used to. The USA team may not be used to the heat, so they're bringing their air condition. It might be an equalizer. I'm just playing advocate for
That's a
Team
stretch.
USA,
That's a
but
stretch. Yeah.
if you are training and living in 85 plus degree heat in your home country and you come to Paris and it's 85 plus, you're an American athlete. Yeah, you may be training in ridiculous heat, but you're not sleeping overnight and recovering in 85 plus heat. Then everyone's kind of returning back to their norm, I would think. But there may be some teams that show up that say, yeah, we are used to air conditioned sleeping and home. However, we're trying to be respectful, so our respect is costing us. Yeah.
Well, it's environmental too, right? So it's also about how is that going to contribute? I mean, the electricity that's going to get used, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not very environmentally friendly either.
For three
And they're
weeks.
going to
3 weeks.
True, yeah, and but it's in Paris, and it's the Paris Climate Accords, right? That
That's true.
Obama signed us into, Trump pulled us out of, and Biden put
Yep.
us back into, and you're going to
Yep.
Paris and you're bringing air conditioners with you, right? So there's
Yep.
just a lot of like interesting caveats.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I'm now you got me interested, Lisa. Now I'm waiting to see. I'm going to do some research to see if any other teams are bringing their own air conditions too.
Yeah,
Maybe Team USA
yeah,
started a bad
yeah.
trend. I don't know.
They might have. They might have. So that's something to watch for, folks, in the next
Yeah.
couple of weeks as you take in the Olympics. Okay, so our next thing we wanted to talk about was the Paris mascot, and I have him right here, or her, or them right here. For folks, well, folks on video can see, but obviously folks listening to this in
So
audio, they
cute.
can't. So the
I love
um
it.
the Paris mascot is a French hat. I don't know what it's called, and I'd never seen it before. And John Oliver did a really funny skit on this. Like, you could have gone with the beret, or you could have gone with like these other hats that are much more famous than whatever this one is called, right? But it's this cute little hat. It's a triangle. It's red, and it has eyes and a mouth and the Paris logo on it. And then the legs on the mascot. One is a leg, like with skin. Well, not skin, obviously. It's a stuffed toy. Um, and the other is a blade, a running blade, right? And then on the bottom of the running blade, there is also braille. I'm not sure what that braille says, but I was just really taken by this when I was in the Paris airport recently, that it was a really inclusive mascot, that it represented both the Olympic and Paralympic athletes in more ways than one, right? And I just thought that was so great. And I bought it and spent way too much money on it, but yeah. So you're going to see this little person thing, triangle, red triangle, bouncing around the Paris Olympics over the next couple of weeks. But be impressed. I was impressed. Like, I don't remember other Olympic mascots being inclusive like this, or maybe they haven't been characters. I don't know.
I don't remember any either, Lisa. That's why I was like, whoa, that is so cool. And seeing the braille on the blade as well, I was just thinking about, how many accessible traits does the mascot have that folks probably didn't think about in the past. Like, that is just excellent. Excellent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I love
So I
it.
just was like, kudos to the Paris Olympics for that little adjustment, which is just going to help athletes of all
Mhm.
ability types feel more included and represented. So, yay.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me move us to number three. Speaking of more identities, we keep adding more and more identities past the air conditioned conversation here. But Nikki Hiltz, congratulations on being the first openly non-binary athlete, as they have qualified for the 1500 meters. So kudos to you, because this is huge. First of all, middle distance runners, take my hats off to y'all. Okay. I'm over here with the sprinters. Like, I want my pain to be over in a few seconds. Okay. 1500 is a big deal. So I'm so appreciative of what you've accomplished. And Hiltz competed collegiately with Oregon and also Arkansas with the Razorbacks. And so just really appreciative of their outness, their outspokenness, their representing our country. I know this has been kind of a lightning bolt conversation on every level of athleticism around the non-binary conversation. And so I'm so appreciative of representation in this moment with this particular athlete. So Nikki, kudos. We're going to be watching you. Congratulations on representing the country. Super proud, super proud. But Lisa, look, I know you and I both watch swimming and track and field. Tell me about number 4.
Yeah. So, I had been binging the USA track and field, at the University of Oregon prior to heading over to the UK to visit family. And I happened to be in the UK when the UK track and field Olympic trials were happening. So I caught some of it on TV, and I was pleasantly surprised. The UK track and field Olympic trials combined both Olympic and Paralympic athletes. So it wasn't Olympic athletes first and then Paralympic second as like separate trials. It was all combined into one trial. So 1 minute you could be watching, the 100 meters for Olympians or able-bodied athletes, and then the next heat would be like the 1500 for Paralympians, right? It was just all mixed together. Like, this is going to be our Olympic team. And so we're having all of these heats, semifinals, and finals together to determine who those athletes would be. And we've talked about this before, maybe not on our unfazed version of the podcast, but we've talked about the ways in which I think the Commonwealth game integrates both para athletes and able-bodied athletes together rather than having them separately. And we've talked about this with the Olympics, that it's still the able-bodied tournament goes first and then the para tournament happens second. And what does it mean to separate it like that? And what kind of message are we sending for athletes who have different levels of mobility and vision and hearing, etc. And so I was just actually quite taken aback. I didn't expect that, because that doesn't happen in the US. That's not how it's done here. So yay to the UK. So Europe too, because we've got the Paris mascot being inclusive physically, and we've got the UK being inclusive, and then we've got the US bringing their air conditioners. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hello. Exactly. That's incredible. That, because we have talked about that on previous podcasts.
Yeah.
What does it mean to separate the two? So I'm so appreciative of what they did with that. That's really cool. Of course, I had to speak on our Team USA, actually gymnastics in general, but let's speak on the women's team specifically. Usually this is a sport historically dominated by white women, but this year, hello, we got a whole lot of melanin on the team, y'all. Of course, we've got Simone Biles, we have Jordan Childs, besties, Sky Blakely, Hesley Rivera, Jade Carey. What I'm appreciative about is we have the first woman to qualify for the Olympics from Haiti. So Lindsey Brown, who is actually representing Team USA, I believe. And, what I think is interesting about that, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But again, there's a number of different athletes that represent their home country possibly, and sometimes they don't. So just know that it may not be comparable. The team that they're competing with may not be their home country or vice versa. But really proud of the accomplishments of this particular team. Let me just rattle off just a few more stats really quickly on the women's team. So the women's team has the oldest athlete entered, Simone Biles, born March 14th, 1997. Interesting. Also, too, with the women's team, at US Olympic trials, the participants that are going into 2024 that have already won a gold medal, obviously Simone Biles, Suni Lee, Jade Carey, and Jordan Childs. So the women's team is completely stacked. We know that Simone Biles has won how many gold? 32 golds, 32 golds, which is incredible when it comes to all around and also by apparatus. Of course, they break it down a bit. And then we'll talk a little bit about a little bit more about Simone, but just a reminder that going into this Olympics, this was the third Olympic trials for Simone. And so, again, one of the most decorated, the most decorated gymnast in the world, one of the most decorated Olympians in the world. I just think it's very cool. So, yeah, excited about this team. High hopes for the team, of course.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to watch them all participate. So, track and field, swimming, and gymnastics are going to be the three that I'm going to be zooming in on, I think. Yeah. All right, so we know that the Olympics is being held in France, and we just wanted to mention that this is important contextual background, thinking about the culture and the history and the politics of France. For those of you who don't know, just recently on June 30th and July 7th, France had their parliamentary elections, and there was a lot of concern that the far right party, the National Rally, was going to be elected with a landslide because they had done really well in the European elections, which had spurred President Macron to call the election in the first place, but didn't happen. The center and the center left groups rallied together, and basically the left wing kind of coalition ended up with the most seats in parliament, and the center, which is Macron's party, came second, and the National Rally, which is the right wing party, came third. So they had the lowest number of seats. So that was a huge win. So it ties into the Olympics because it's France, right? But also because an Olympic sport is football, soccer. And one of the French footballers, Kylian Mbappe, had spoken out about this election ahead of June 30th, and how important it was for people to vote and to prevent fascism, the rise of fascism, the rise of the right wing. So obviously at the same time, the Euro 2024 soccer tournament was happening, and France ultimately got knocked out in the semifinals. But I just wanted to highlight how important it is when athletes do that, right? Thinking about you have a platform, and so you are uniquely positioned to be able to use your voice and your platform to advocate for social justice and advocate for progression, right? And not backsliding. And so I just thought it was really great that this footballer, he's very, very famous in football, in soccer, right? Like he's one of the best players that has been around in recent history. And so his words really made a difference. Was it enough to tip the balance? Probably not, but certainly I bet it spurred some people to participate. And so you have this French player, very famous player. They're in the Euro Cup. They're heading into the Olympics. France will most likely have a team, I would imagine, in the Olympics for men's soccer. And so there might be a lot of that. So we might see more of that in the Olympics. So I would encourage our listeners to think about our political climate, our cultural climate, and the ways in which athletes who are at the Olympics use or do not use their voice to advocate for social change and progressive policies and for diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And that sort of thing. So yeah,
absolutely. And we know, please run out and get Dr. Sean Mark Anderson's book on that very topic around how it folds into this work, going well back before, but the earliest ones I can remember that I think are important and iconic when you think about the visual of Tommy Smith and John Carlos, in Mexico City with the raised black fist, gloved fist, protesting in particular, and then trickling on down to, LeBron James and the shut up and dribble movement, which he actually flipped on Laura Ingraham saying, hey, I'm going to trademark it and I'm going to keep on talking. Right. So, given that, I think you're bringing up such a great point of paying attention to who's silent and who uses their platform for good. I think both of those are really good observations going into every single Olympics that we have, but certainly this one. So especially since, Lisa, we've talked about this in other non-athlete, non-sports related episodes around how many, what was this called? The super election year, where there's 66 different elections going on around the world. Well, this would be a prime time for our athletes to speak up around those issues. So that's great. So speaking of that, we're talking about athletes that uh, can represent their home country. Let's also think about number 7, which has been a team that I've been following for quite a few years now. Paris is the 3rd Olympics where there has been a refugee Olympic team. If you have not followed them, they have a really great and active Instagram account where they feature their athletes and the conditions under which they've been competing. Lisa, I don't know about you, but obviously there is no country that doesn't have its challenges, but to not be able to train at home or around your family, or maybe you no longer have family for whatever reasons, training under deep duress really catches my heartstrings when it comes to this. I've thought about people that got to train under perfect conditions, and now you have this refugee Olympic team with 34 athletes, 12 different sports, 15 different countries represented, and here they come to the Paris Olympics. So I think we need to watch out for them, and really appreciate every single one of them having a in-depth backstory as to how they got to this Olympics. So very important to hold, and not I don't want to make them inspiration porn, Lisa. So let me just caveat it by saying that, but at the same time, remembering that their training conditions have been unique compared to probably most other athletes that are Olympians from their various countries. So that one's really important to me.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that
Mhm.
not every Olympian has access to those
Yes.
training conditions that you're talking about, but also even access to a national identity, right? Because they have been persecuted, they have fled for whatever reason, and they are now refugees, yet they're trying to excel and be the best that they can be in their sport. And creating this refugee Olympic team gives them an opportunity to do that on the world stage. So I think it's an acknowledgement of not everyone has the same access to an identity that maybe many of us take for granted, right? Citizenship, nationality, those kinds of things. So, yeah, good one. That's a good
Absolutely.
one. So,
Absolutely.
add that to the list of folks that you're watching. All right, so number 8. Okay, this is a bigger one. So some of you may know that drug testing has come up recently. There were some congressional hearings because it finally came out that the Chinese swim team from the 2021 Olympics were doping, essentially. Many of those swimmers were doping. Some of them, I think, got world records. They won gold maybe in a relay. And so it's just kind of blown up in the last couple of months related to the World Anti-Doping Association, WADA. And then every country has their own anti-doping association. So the US is USADA, right? USADA. And some of the complaints that are emerging is because this is a global organization, WADA, right? It's not possible for them to monitor and create the infrastructure in all of the countries around the world to do drug testing and to create anti-doping strategies, right? So they kind of outsource that to the individual countries. So the US has one, Canada has one, UK, other countries around the world, right? But because of that happening, there's inconsistencies in the ways in which athletes are monitored and tested. So some of the US athletes, when they were at the congressional hearings, talked about getting woken up in the middle of the night by USADA reps. They have to pee in a cup in front of the person, right? So there's a humiliation, there's like a disruption that's happening to your life. But that level of drug testing doesn't prevent doping in the United States, but the degree to which athletes are kind of under a microscope doesn't exist. It's not replicated everywhere in the world. And that isn't because everywhere in the world isn't as honest or ethical as US. That's not what I mean. It's about resources, it's about access. It's kind of much more complicated than that. But I think that there is something to think about here when we go back to your definition at the beginning of Olympism, right? Where you talked about blending sport with culture and education. Olympism seeks to ... respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. And then we think about the ways in which this goal of competition free from cheating and discrimination, bringing communities together, ending war, right? Like kind of all of that really aspirational language. But what is it also? What's a byproduct of that, right? Of competition is this desire to win and have recognition and be adored. And that isn't always necessarily led by the athlete. It could be led by, kind of the organizations in the country. And so how are we monitoring that? So it's just something I think to keep in the back of our mind as we watch the Olympics around, because this is just really fresh. It's really fresh, particularly for US athletes. And then obviously with the Chinese swimmers, I'm not sure what happened. I have a feeling they're still all competing. I don't think they got banned. So definitely something to check out and pay attention to. And then how the US, or sorry, how the larger Olympic and Paralympic movement globally is going to continue to address this in terms of fairness and, holding people accountable for when doping happens. So not meaning to be a downer, but I just think that's kind of a cloud that's hanging over some of the competition as we approach the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really important too, because I remember watching several different documentaries talking about doping in particular, and how even some of the athletes who were discovered that they did the drug testing and they were discovered to be doping, they almost knew that they were going to get caught, but some of them said, I almost didn't care because I wanted the glory of the moment, because you can't take the moment away from me despite taking the credential later. And I'm like, that is some sick shit right there. That is sick. But again, I love your point around, we don't know where the pressures are coming from. Some of them may be individual pressures, some may be coming from other countries. Some sports in particular, we know in their respective countries, people are trained from childhood. I mean, they're trained from 3, 4, 5 years old to become Olympians. And so the pressure is a lifelong pressure. And so I appreciate, you're pointing out that it's not just, oh, this is just a really bad person that wants all the glory for themselves. Pressure comes from a lot of different places for Olympians. And so we just need to acknowledge that as well. Yeah. So let me share with you, since Lisa took us on a little bit of a downer on the roller coaster, let me bring us back up here. So I was so excited to see that at least 2 sports this year had therapy dogs at the Olympic trials, right? Which was super cool, right? So 4-year-old golden retriever was at USA Gymnastics as its first official therapy dog. So Beacon was his name. And Beacon had a credential just like all the humans walking around saying goodest boy to prove it. And so I thought that was really cool, that USA Gymnastics was thinking both about the mental health and stress levels of their athletes, and also how to feature a community member that happened to be a four-legged friend, which I thought was very cool. And then also, Lisa, you and I, we ready to jump in the pool with them in Indianapolis, right? The swimmers also had their own local therapy dogs. They had about 60 dogs. And so they had an entire room. I remember watching the Olympic trials on Friday night of that week, and there was an entire room full of dogs, and people were walking in to pet them before they were about to do their walkout to go to the blocks. It was just very cool. And you could see how, like, the stress, not that they weren't stressed anymore, but you could just see their entire demeanor, and the edge that was on their bodies wasn't on them anymore. Like, you could see the most stone-faced, person that's trying to get on the blocks to become an Olympian for their first time, and they just melt. when they see the therapy dog. So I just thought that was just a very cool addition to the experience. And so now I'm wondering, Lisa, if they're going to do it in Paris. We'll see.
Ooh, that is an interesting question, and I think it connects to the last point that we're going to make, number 10, but it also connects back to what we were just talking about with doping and the pressure and the stress and what that can, the ways in which athletes can make those choices, but can also be manipulated into making those choices because, you want to win for your country, don't you? Right. And the ways in which, whether it's a therapy dog or other strategies for mental health when you're under such high pressure and the whole world is watching, right? That I do really appreciate that happened, at least with the gymnasts and with the swimmers, which then, so this segues us into our last one where we're coming back and talking about the wonderful Simone Biles. So recently she, kind of lamented that if she states that she is the best gymnast, then she is called arrogant or cocky, right? But the facts are there on paper. She is indeed, as you identified, Shaunna, the most decorated gymnast, right? And so she is the best. And so we just wanted to encourage people to think about when athletes, particularly women, and even more particularly women of color, talk about their skill and use words like the best or most decorated or GOAT, right? Greatest of all time. And they're talking about themselves. A reaction you might have around cockiness or arrogance, where is that coming from, right? Because would you have that same reaction to a Michael Phelps, for example, right? And then in thinking about Simone's, articulation of strength and how good she is, it made us think back to the 2021 Olympics when she pulled out because of her mental health and having the twisties, right? And if you kind of lose where you are in the middle of a vault, like that could end very badly in terms of injury. And Shaunna reminded me that people during that Olympics called her a traitor, among many other things, because she chose her mental health over winning a medal for the United States. And I mean, I kind of am at a loss for words in remembering that, so she's not good enough if she puts her mental health first, despite the fact that not doing so could have ended her career, right? If something had gone wrong. And then when she acknowledges and advocates for herself that she is one of the best gymnasts of all time, she's called cocky and arrogant. Like, so there's
no win.
No win there for her, right? Yeah. So we just got to give a lot of love to Simone Biles when she's out there.
That's right.
Right? Like,
that's right.
A lot of love.
That's exactly right. Well, for Simone, I don't care if she doesn't do anything but do a split and get up and walk off and doesn't do anything else for the whole damn Olympics. I don't give a shit, right? Because she's proven, by the time y'all hear this podcast, turn on Netflix and watch Simone Biles Rising, because that's coming out and is already out at the moment. So you can see her entire story, the background of that entire story. But this is a woman where not only are the twisties, or what they call the yips, it's dangerous for gymnasts, especially in the air, because they don't know where the ground is. They can truly hurt themselves. But think about a woman who is literally documented at the best, as the best in her field, long term. She has, I think it's 4 or 5 gymnastics moves that are named after her because of the level of difficulty. And you have a problem with her pulling out because she doesn't know where the ground is. But she's supposed to be a patriot of this country by breaking her neck, or God forbid anything happened to any of them. She would be considered a patriot by harming herself in some way for the sake of overlooking mental health and representing her country. No, that you're right. You're right, Lisa. It's a no-win situation. I support that she pulled out during that year. And guess what, Lisa? Let's go to the rule book. The rule book says that we have 5 gymnasts and 2 alternates. Let the alternates do their fucking job. How about that? Let them do their job, right? We have alternates for a reason. And so, to me, I'm like, I think it's so fascinating that, again, we have another woman of color who is never given the full credit that they're due, despite being the GOAT. Like, the GOAT, I know people throw around the GOAT a bit, like, it's like a cute tag phrase or what have you. But we are talking about the greatest of all time at her craft, documented. Even if she's never said a mumbling word, the stats, since white privilege, and especially when it comes to male female concepts, we always want to talk about fairness and who's the best. Based on fairness, she is the best. She has literally had moves that were so difficult that they tried to ban them. And if she did the move, even if she fell, the score rating, the value of the move was still more than anybody else in the competition. But she's not the GOAT. Get out of here. This is one of those moments, Lisa, where I'm a fan of Simone, and I think anybody who's screaming fairness, even if you don't like her, you still need to call her the GOAT because of what she's accomplished in this sport over many years, 3 Olympics,
Yep.
and even pulling out. So I'm grateful
Yeah.
that we have a Simone Biles that gets to mentor so many folks. And I remember one of the stats Lisa talked about specifically how many, I think we are the only team in the Olympics this year and the only team ever to have 3 all-around champs on the same team. We have 3 all-around champs on the same team. Even a bad day is a good day in their world right now, based on who's on their team. So I'm really excited to see them compete. And it kind of takes me back, Lisa, to um, my days as a kid when I was really stupid and you're trying to do a handstand on the back of the couch stuff. That was me. I was the one, like, trying to do what they were doing on TV, right? But Lisa, I think we've gotten through our 10. And again, these
Yep.
may not be like the lead headlines in the Paris Olympic stories, but we thought they were unique and fascinating and niche. And
Mm-hmm.
it's our hope that you continue to follow the developments based on all 10 of these, right?
Yeah, and I just want to revisit something because as you were talking, it popped into my head as another thing that listeners you should watch for if you don't already do this is the treatment of men and women athletes at the Olympics, the ways in which they are talked about in the
Yes.
media, the ways in which they're treated, because there's still
Mhm.
sexism that's happening, right? So Simone Biles being called arrogant when a Michael Phelps probably wouldn't be, that's the problem. And it just
Yes.
kind of popped into my head that as you're watching the Olympics over the next several weeks, pay attention to that because dads will rarely get called dads, but moms, their fact that they're a mother will get pulled up almost immediately, right? So just stuff like that I think is always useful, is always useful.
Oh yeah, Lisa, we're already seeing that in the news now where, a woman is not called an Olympian, she's called the wife of such and such a pro athlete is going to their 3rd Olympics. Like we're already seeing that rear its ugly head. And so pay attention to that. Course correct in regard to that. We know that Lisa has a very founded soapbox around calling women girls when they are in fact adults. So pay attention to that as well, right? So we got a lot of things to pay attention to. So I just want to underscore, I don't even have to add to that. Thank you for reminding us. Pay attention to language, y'all, for sure. So well, this concludes our Paris Olympics 2024 special. I've been really looking forward to this conversation with Lisa because, yes, look at oh, I love him. I love him. Oh my gosh, too cool. Look at the leg, even the braille on the leg, y'all. That is so cool. Well, I'm glad you spent that money, Lisa. That is very cool. So please continue to follow along with the Olympics and chime in because we're certainly going to be posting as things develop. Lisa, we may even need to do like a live takeover of the social media as the sports are actually occurring. But super excited to see all of the Olympians at hopefully their very best. But that is a wrap for this episode. Continue to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Instagram, of course, LinkedIn. Email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com. Lisa, maybe, one day our dream will come true and like some network will hire us to cover the future Olympics somewhere. I think 2028 is in LA, if I'm correct, here in the US. So hire us to come talk about the Olympics and inequities that we know will still be there, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
bring us
Yes.
on to do that. But certainly, if you like this week's episode, like, subscribe, leave a review, share with any networks that you think we would have voice on, share with your friends, coworkers, and of course, others in this phase of your life. So we'll probably talk to you after the Olympics, y'all. Take care.
See ya.